Well, um, it's been a little while since I've done a video on the FilmLog, and actually a heck of a lot has changed behind the scenes, but I don't think a lot of it's super noteworthy since it's just a bunch of API work. And in fact, I had the FilmLog.org taken down for a while I was working on all that, but it is back up and accessible. And one new feature I wanted to talk about that I've been working on a lot the past week is H&D Curves. So if we go here and let's go to test these. Um, and it actually started with some really a good series of videos from the Naked Photographer on YouTube that outlines the Kodak method for deriving these. And previously, I had no idea how to really figure all this stuff out. So if you're not sure how to do that, I recommend his video series. It is extremely helpful. He uses the Kodak method, and if you want to try to do it on your own, if you look up the Sensitometry Workbook or H740, it's a PDF that kind of goes through how to do all this, and I kind of get some of the values. I'll go through some of this briefly, but basically started all this because I was trying to figure out the proper exposure for Panchro 400. It seems like I could never quite get there. And also, I bought a bunch of boxes of Adox CHS 100, which is a great film. And I wanted to make sure I didn't needlessly burn through sheets of film not properly exposing it. And that led me to this. Previously, I was doing all this on pen and paper, and then I was using Power BI. I actually started using LibreOffice and just using spreadsheets, and all those methods worked, but they kind of had some caveats, and so I wanted to try to at least get some of this stuff into the web app. I was always planning on doing that, and here we are. So this is the main section, and actually I should point out, films used to be here in the user preferences, and I moved them out, and this includes film stock, so that still works the way it did before. It's a little buggy, but it's here. But film tests is all the new stuff, and you can see here's all the tests I've done. These are my actual tests, so this is my actual account. And you can see actually on that note, part of what made me want to do this sooner was Ultrafine Finesse 400. Seems like there's still a lot of speculation of what film that is and where it comes from and all that. And I did buy a bulk roll of it, and I'm going to be shooting it, but I decided to do some film test on it, and that's this green line right here. And interesting enough, you can see it's actually really close to Adox HR50 for my test. I should also point out I'm using Xstall replenishment for all of these tests, at least right now. And so your tests are, I'm sure, going to be different than mine. And this also includes how you expose it, all sorts of stuff. So, but I did notice that was really interesting. HR50 is a 50 speed film, and Finesse 400 is supposed to be a 400. My test for HR50 actually showed that it's much slower, at least in Xstall. But needless to say, that the curve is what I thought was striking. It's not identical, but it's pretty close. Like there's this little kink here, there's a kink here. Yeah, so pretty interesting. Anyway, so now that I have this working, I guess I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to switch to my local install here, my test data. And first, we're going to add a new film. You would have to do this if this was a brand new account, excuse me, if you wanted to track film stock and also if you wanted to log exposure. So even if you're not doing film curves, good idea to add some of the films you're going to be using for the other parts of the film log. So I'm going to add, I don't know, yeah, my awesome film, why not? And we'll make this like 6400 ISO, wishful thinking. And we'll set the color. Right now the color doesn't mean anything except for the graph, the H&D curve itself, but it might come up in other places. So go find that. Here it is. Okay, so now this is sort of all the newer stuff, and it's still kind of sparse. Notice you can't actually change anything about the film after you've added it. So that's kind of a UI miss that I need to work on. And we'll get into some more things that aren't completely fleshed out yet as well. But if I'm doing an exposure test, I'm currently using an enlarger because I don't have a sensitometer. So that was built around this concept. So I'm going to pick my Omega, pick the, I don't know, I really do this. I think I use my 150. Head height in whatever measurement system you want. I just let you roam free there. And then you can pick what type. Here, I don't have this part working yet either, but you can pick your step tablet because presumably you're going to be doing exposure density readings off some step tablet, and you're going to want to have those values for actually graphing the film curves. I made it so that I have a couple step tablets, one for 4x5 and one for anything else. And so I have two here. So I'm going to pick this one. Lux is my Lux reading that I got off under the enlarger when I have my setup. The f-stop is what the enlarger was set to. Exposure time is a little bit different than the other parts of the film log because I'm using a darkroom timer and I'm not thinking of things in terms of like 1 over something. I'm thinking in terms of things in like seconds and partial seconds. So for this, instead of doing something like 1 over 2 or 5 seconds, I just have it done as decimal, so half a second. And I mean, most of the film tests I think are going to be probably around that, I would imagine. Filters, if you're using filter, Greg, the naked photographer, recommends an 80A for daylight balanced. If you're using a tungsten enlarger, which I am, so I think pretty much it's always going to be an 80A. In fact, maybe I'll make this like a checkbox because right now it lists all the filters that I have. I don't think there would be a reason to use a circular polarizer, for example, for the film test. Anyway, put in your developer. Right now, this is all freeform. I originally had it where I had this concept of development recipes. The idea being I could link it over to the developing section, and I might do that at some point, but for now, it was just getting unwieldy. So you can just freeform put all this in. We'll say, I don't know, 18 minutes, deb temperature 20. Again, Celsius or Fahrenheit, it's up to you. I do a water stop. Sorry, I do a water pre-bath, a water stop. I do rotary agitation, and it's about 45, we'll say 40 RPM. Some notes. Okay, now that I've added it, boom, there's my test. And you notice all these are null because we didn't put it in. When you click on it, that's where sort of the fun begins. So here at the top, I've got my step entries, and I'm going to pull up on my other screen here what these values would be. So I'm just going to go through it. 6.5, 1.52, 1.41. And the cool thing is if I decide to press enter, boom, it starts graphing it for me. So you don't have to go through the whole thing if you don't want to start seeing the results. 109, 108, 7, 6.77. I think, can't remember which film this actually is. I just pulled one that I already had. Oops. D. Actually, while I'm doing this too, I have it set up to where if for some reason you're on mobile and you want to do it using a wheel, you can. I didn't test that, but I think it works. Instead of just typing them in directly. So, okay, got all that in there. Click update, and there's my graph. Also, with regards to these, so eventually it would be nice. Baseball and Dmax, I think you're going to have to test on your own, since ideally you're going to want to test that outside of the exposure area that you use to make your step wedge, at least I think. So, that's not something that you can kind of derive it from the graph if you look at the base here and you look at the top of the graph, but that's really not, I don't think that's correct because base fog, if your test doesn't include the toe, your base fogs and reading's going to be off. And likewise, your Dmax, if you've got more room to go in your curve, you're not at max density in your testing, then that's also going to be not reflected in your actual step wedges. So you might have to do that on your own. In terms of, I don't think the software can graph that for you, but in theory, the software could probably figure out all these three things. The thing is, I don't know how to do that. So gamma would be roughly the straight line. And again, this is covered in the Naked Photographer's videos and Kodak and Beyond the Zone system and plenty of places to try to figure out how to do this. But with gamma, it's usually the straight line. So that would be like roughly like, I don't know, here. It's really maybe all the way up to here. Maybe that's just the beginning of the shoulder, but somewhere in here. The contrast index requires you to do some funky measurements using a ruler, at least as I know how to do it. I don't know how to translate that to how you'd possibly calculate that using this graph, but I know it's possible. So the idea there is that eventually the graph can hopefully figure this out for you, or at least make this easier to derive, so that you don't have to do this on pen and paper, which even with this feature, I still do it on pen and paper just to derive those numbers. And likewise, Kodak ISO, I get that using the H740 document I mentioned. And I got, my numbers are all over the map, but to basically calculate it, you need to know the contrast index first. And you also need to derive some things that are on this graph of like your, what, point 1 of your density is point A of the calculation, and then that you have to do an anti-log. It's at some point maybe the feature will be here, but for now, really, oops, I broke it. For now, really the how did I do that actually? That's interesting. For now, the point is really just to, well, that one's ugly. These are all test data. Is to really look at your family of curves, and eventually, like right now, the film test basically shows all the curves. In reality, it actually doesn't, because I have more tests here than you can see on the graph. That's a feature I'm working to implement that's not there yet. So right now, if you add a new test, it's going to immediately appear on this graph. But once you have like a bunch of these, it's going to be really hard to read. And likewise, if you're doing like a family of curves, so you're doing a bunch of exposure tests for one film, that doesn't exist yet, but it will probably pretty soon. And likewise, if you're wanting to do arbitrary comparisons of film tests, be it across the same film or across multiple films, I think that would be really useful. I know how I'm going to do that. I haven't done that yet. So some rough edges. But anyway, I've kind of blabbered on enough. So this is basically what it is. I will point out too, if you really want to get in the weeds with software that's a little bit more full featured, the BTZS Windows application still exists. It's pretty old. I haven't used it myself, but I know like the View Camera Store uses it if you're going to have them do exposure testing. So you might try that if you want to do something that's more maybe currently full feature than what this is. For me, what I really needed, even if I'm doing pen and paper, was to be able to pull up a test and at least, if nothing else, get these values. So for me, that's really valuable. Because that way, if I'm doing pen and paper, I can just look at this chart and then still graph it. I don't have to go back and forth. And like adding these tests manually was a kind of a nightmare. So now it's much easier than it was. Anyways, again, I'm rambling. This is the newest feature of the FilmLog. So if you're interested, the actual fancy new features aren't out yet. Like you noticed, I can't modify these yet. I will probably be pushing the changes here in the next, I don't know, maybe as early as today. So by the time you see this video, maybe it's already available. If not, it will be soon. And when I say soon, I mean that's on the filmlog.org. So if you're interested in the FilmLog, you can register, create your own account. It's not, I will admit, not the easiest process currently. I'm not a front-end web developer by day. So, you know, it is what it is. But you can use this, make an account. Right now it's free. The code is also free. So if you either want to help me with the code or you just want to log a bug, contribute to the project on your own, there it is. You can, if you want to fork it, you can. So, you know, if you know a thing or two about writing in web languages, you probably can muddle through this, hopefully. So maybe I'm not the best web dev programmer either. It's not what I do by day. Anyway, hopefully people find this interesting and are, you know, excited to maybe use it. Feedback would be greatly appreciated. If you do want to provide that, you can find me in various places, including here. I'm on various Discords. You can also just create a GitLab account if you don't have one and just log a bug. So I can, especially if you run into an issue, definitely something I'd want to be aware of, and I can get that fixed for you. So there you go. That's it. And hopefully I'll have more of these videos coming up soon. I haven't, you know, I took a kind of hiatus from working on the FilmLog in great capacity for a while, just because there's just so much to do on the back end. And there still is, but I think at this point it's pretty well functional for a bunch of this stuff. And I pretty much use this probably on a weekly basis for my own stuff. So hopefully people find it useful. If not, maybe it gives you some ideas at least how to do densitometry. And again, if you want to know more information about that, I glossed over a whole bunch of details. Check out the Naked Photographers YouTube series on it. It's pretty great. It definitely helped me out figure out, you know, what's going on. And it's a good thing to do if you really kind of want to know how you're, nothing else, figure out what your good development times are for how you work and how you expose. That's pretty valuable. So, all right, that's it. I'll catch you next time.